Hey, all. Let's look at Mark chapter 6, starting in verse 53. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored to the shore. And when they got out of the boat, the people immediately recognized him and ran about the whole region and began to bring the sick people on their beds to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he came, in villages, cities, or countryside, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and implored him that they might touch even the fringe of his garment. And as many as touched it were made well. So this is one of those summary sections in the Gospel of Mark that kind of fills in a gap between sections and is generally descriptive of what was going on. So Jesus is in this region of Gennesaret, and it emphasizes here healing. Notice in other places it might emphasize exorcism, but in this place it emphasizes Jesus healing. I want to present a kind of a parable of what we do as Christians with regard to Jesus. We commonly think that the disciples were more privileged to see Jesus and be with him while he was on the earth than we are, who don't get to see him in the same way. But the Bible emphasizes repeatedly that we are just as privileged, just differently, but we are just as privileged as they. So let me suggest kind of a model for how we do our Christian lives and how we do what was going on here, but in our own day, sort of an application for us in our own day. So the first thing is, it says that they heard about it and they brought people to him. Well, that is what we do. That is what Christians are called to do. Paul says that we do not preach ourselves, but we preach Jesus Christ as Lord and ourselves as your servants for his sake. And I think that's what we are always to do for people. Is our task is to bring people to him, not to preach ourselves, not to preach our church, not to preach our own personalities, but our task is always to bring people to Jesus. I think the four friends of the man who was paralyzed in the beginning of the Gospel of Mark got that. They thought, our job is just to bring people to Jesus. And so I think the same thing is going on for us. We are to bring people. And again, sometimes we're bringing people who are unable to come themselves. Somehow they don't have faith, but maybe we can, in our faith, bring them to him. And then it says that they brought those people wherever they heard he was. Well, what are the places we hear that he is? In particular, they are when his people gather in his name. Where two or more gather in his name, he says, there I am in your midst. And so one Christian alone is usually never adequate to present Jesus. But we are called to bring those who don't know him, those who are in need, to the place where we hear he is, and he has told us that he is in the gathering of his people. Whether it's in a home or in a church building, that is where we bring him. And notice that it also emphasizes everywhere, villages, countryside, fields. This is interesting because Mark hasn't emphasized this yet, and the idea seems to be that we're to bring people where we know he is, and that is in all the diversity of places that people are. It's not just in quote-unquote sacred spaces, but we're to try to bring people to Jesus in every place that we go. And notice here, it's interesting that it says that they might touch the hem of his garment, or the corner of his garment. Now maybe they heard about the woman with the issue of blood who touched the corner of his garment. But in the scriptures, the corner of a garment, of a Jewish man's garment, was pretty significant, and it evokes a lot of different things. Remember, they would wear this kind of a robe with four corners, and on those corners, they were to put tassels, blue fabric, a fabric and a color that was used exclusively for temple decorations. So the idea of the tassels was meant to be, you would see the tassels, and it would be a visual reminder of the commandments. And so I think there's, for us, a kind of an application is we bring people to Jesus for discipleship. That's what the commandments are about. The Old Testament celebrates God's teaching, says that they're a way of life. And in a similar way, we say that Jesus is the authoritative teacher on how life should work. And so we bring people to him so that they can learn. They can learn his commandments, which bring life and our life. But there's a lot of other imagery of the corner of the garment. Remember, Ruth uncovers the corner of Boaz's garment in her proposal to him of marriage. And so there's a kind of a marital theme, we could say a covenant theme, that we bring people to him, hopefully, so that they would enter into the new covenant of faith in him. But remember, David would say repeatedly in the Psalms that he wants to be protected in the shadow of God's wings. And of course, that imagery comes from the temple, where the cherubim are in the Holy of Holies, and the cherubim have these wings. So it's about bringing them into his presence, into his protective presence, and into his purifying presence. Right? To come into the presence of God is not just a simple thing, but it means that his presence changes us. Hopefully, his presence changes and purifies us. And then, of course, finally, what they were specifically coming for, healing. In Malachi 4:2, it says, "The Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in his wings." And that word wing and the corner of the garment, they're the same. And so they were specifically coming for healing. But remember, in the Gospels, Jesus' miracles almost always are a sign, right? And the sign points to something. The sign refers to something. The sign is not an end in and of itself. Whenever Jesus heals, maybe he heals physical blindness. It's not just about physical blindness. It's about a blindness of the heart. And so when Jesus heals in the Scriptures, he's always pointing to something greater. Hey, you've been lame, and I've made you well. Now turn from sin so that you can be well in every regard. And so when the Scriptures speak of healing, they are far more interested, or very much interested, in the whole restoration of the human person. Jesus comes not just to heal our bodies, not just to save our souls, but to put every part of us back together as it ought to be in relation to God and to one another. So may we be like these people, and may we learn to bring people to Jesus so that they could touch the hem of his garment and be put back together by him in all the ways that God intends for us to be put together. Amen.